Welcome to today's panel discussion on data science. So data science has become an essential part of software development. As we all know, it's something that can be used to drive productivity, improve business decisions, and with recent developments like increased cloud adoptions and predictive analytics and ChatEPT, it's something that we're all quite excited about. So the purpose of today's discussion is to kind of touch base on where BBD is from a data science perspective. And joining us today, we have some distinguished panelists, kind of the faces of data science here at BBD. We've got Marius, who can talk about data science from more of a business and strategic perspective. And then we have TNA and Rob, who are our technical experts in the field. So is there anything that you guys want to add before we start going into the discussion?
No, I mean, I think let's see what comes up.
Okay, cool. Then we'll kick right off. So starting with a question for Marius. When and why did BBD decide to start a data science team?
Well, Russ and I had some discussions about 2.5 years ago. We sort of saw a lot of opportunities in the analytics space. We saw clients wanting to have additional offerings on top of their software. So to bring in the software aspect, but also the AI or analytics aspect. And we were falling short from that perspective. And in some cases, when we are trying to gain customers or gain a particular project, we would actually lose out because we didn't have that offering. So yeah, 2021, January, myself, Russell, Rob, and Leo were the guys that actually tried to start the initiative. So yeah, so it's been going for just over 2 years. And yeah, I think today we'll hopefully give you an idea of some of the things that we've done to date, but also some of the things that we want to do and where we think you can get involved as well.
So in terms of that, just so that people kind of know what we're trying to accomplish with this data science team, what are the core competencies that we're trying to focus on with the data science team?
Yeah, so in retrospect, me calling it data science is probably a bad idea. Essentially, there's 3 core competencies that we're trying to focus on. So one is data architecture. So if we think a lot of customers are moving to the cloud, a lot of them are now looking at their current architecture from a data perspective. How does that fit into with their on-premise environments? How do they migrate from on-premise to the cloud? So that sort of competency has grown a lot more. And that is something that we want to sort of push within BBD, both from an Azure and AWS or any other cloud sort of environment, but obviously not just limited to a cloud specific thing. So a lot of us are working at clients. There's data that needs to be processed. So, from a data architecture perspective, that's quite a key competency. The second one sort of falls into the data engineering space. So you have the data architect who designs it. The data engineer is the one that actually implements that data architecture. So builds out the data lakes, builds out the warehouses, does the data integration aspects. So I think a lot of us in some capacity might have done some data integration to some perspective, but that sort of is where the data engineer fits in. And then finally, the last competency is our data science, AI, analytics, the cool stuff. I think what I try to put there. And I think when we talk about data science, I think that's sort of what everyone goes to initially. But I think, as we chat around some of the aspects, yeah, that's the fun piece, but the 2 other competencies that I've mentioned are actually precursors and very important to achieve that.
So while we're on the topic of data analytics, and I'm looking at some of our representatives from Ilion in the front row, to provide some more context, how does Ilion and the data science team overlap or work together or kind of fit into BBD? Yeah, what's the relation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've been asked that quite a lot. If we have Ilion, why do we have a data science team and vice versa? I think it is, yes, we do work together on a lot of initiatives. We try and complement each other both from a skills perspective and an expertise perspective. I think to date, Ilian has been focusing a lot more in the financial services sector, where we're trying to focus broader than that. And then obviously, we try not to step on each other's toes and steal each other's business. And we'd rather try and help and complement each other from that perspective. So we share skills across the two organizations. We are one at the end of the day. But yes, I think Ilian more focused on financial services. And we're trying to look at aspects beyond that and outside of that.
Okay, cool. So Rob, you've been involved in the data science team since day one. What are some of the interesting projects that you've worked on? Because you've kind of had a finger in all the data science pies.
I'm probably going to forget projects. I'm just knowing my forgettery. The first one that we worked on was a inventory system. That project was, they got stock back from a client, and then they needed to be able to actually see what had changed on the item they had sent out. So the user would take items out of a kit, and then they would bill for the items used. And that was being done by hand. And the idea was to automate it from a computer vision perspective. Then we did a project to convert Microsoft SQL to T-SQL. Leo was involved in that one. Then we did another computer vision project to detect birds in a field. That was an interesting problem because a bird is a fairly small thing. You're trying to pick it up from 200 meters away.
With low budget equipment as well on a Raspberry Pi 3 because the Raspberry Pi 4s weren't available.
So that was quite interesting and challenging. We also did a Nethack challenge and got thoroughly beat. It's a really hard reinforcement learning problem. It's a very interesting research space. It's starting to push out into the real world. If you look at GPT, you'll find that it's actually been fine-tuned using reinforcement learning mechanisms. Not sure which ones I've forgotten. Oh yeah, we did Deep Racer at the pop-up event. It's also a reinforcement learning problem. That one is a self-driving or autonomous car. We did relatively well.
We won.
There's a trophy and everything in the Hive. You can go check it out later if you want to. Then on top of all our projects and POCs that we've done, we've developed some really interesting and important tools that TNA, maybe that you can touch on a bit.
So yeah, I think to start from, these are all tools that we've fine-tuned existing models on, and they might seem a little familiar to you. So we have optical character recognition models so that you can pass in documents and we can spit out text, and then speech to text and topic modeling and intent recognition as well. And, you know, all the things that kind of make up Seeker at the end of it. But you can use all of them separately.
So do you want to touch a little bit more on Seeker? I know I wasn't supposed to ask you too much about this, but everybody wants to know about Seeker.
From my perspective, okay, Seeker is really cool.
What is Seeker? Let's start with that for those who don't know. What did it start as?
So Seeker started as just a demo, taking information and making it searchable, basically. And I joined after that when they were like, cool, that's great. So we started with like a haphazard mix of like question answering models and Elasticsearch. And we decided, no, we need a proper pipeline to take all of this random data everywhere, fetch it, make it usable, and then search on it.
So kind of what Seeker has turned into since then is kind of a set of tools that can be applied to any workload in any space.
Yes, I think the name is misleading because Seeker is not only search, it's actually a complex pipeline to transform data.
we'll probably have to have a whole discussion about SQL one day and what exactly that is, but we'll focus on data science for now. So we've spoken a bit about the projects that we've done, but Marius, what kind of opportunities are we looking for now in the future?
I think over the last 2 years, the projects that we've done, and Rob sort of mentioned, have been a lot of POCs that we've done, haven't really materialized in actual project work at clients. So we took a look at sort of, okay, what are we focusing on and where should we focus? You know, and they sort of again tie into those core competencies. I think definitely we're looking for data architecture and data engineering opportunities. How can we help the clients build out their data environments? Because let's be honest, you know, without data in a decent state, the AI and analytics side of that is pretty useless. Okay, so that's fundamental and a core skill that, you know, and opportunities that we are looking for. From an AI and analytics perspective, I think initially we were trying to do anything and everything. And, you know, when we said, okay, when people ask, what can we do? Well, we can do vision, we can do NLP, we can do whatever. And I think sometimes we've got a bit of a weird face and like, really? So we sort of are, as based on the POCs that we've done today. So we're trying to focus in the vision space and in the NLP space. That's where we've got the most experience at the moment. So if there are opportunities in that space, I think we've got a little bit more experience. We've done a few things and we can actually show things. We're not against trying to do anything else. We're always wanting to learn and do a few new things. But I think if we wanted to show people what we have done, you know, those are the 2 areas that we want to focus on. And then finally, the ML ops side of things. Okay. I think we've realized that's quite an important place to try and play in, because that actually takes the models and puts it into production, checks how it's actually performing, you know, what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be monitored, what needs to be changed. It affects your data pipelines and all of that into that process. And why we see that as being quite important for us to have a skill and an opportunity is the actual building of the model is sometimes very difficult for us to get in at a client. You know, it could contain a bit of IP that they want to maintain within the organization. And so they are generally set up to create their own models or prototypes, chuck it over to a fence to a team that actually productionizes it and then, you know, and maintains it. So in that case, you know, we're trying to get into that space, hopefully then being able to move back into actual building the model sort of side of things.
So from our audience's perspective and from BBD, or the different teams in BBD's perspective, what can the data science team do to assist the clients that we already have? And this is a question for everyone, so you feel free to jump in.
So I think, first of all, where do we fit in and how do we position ourselves? So I think the easiest way to explain us is see as very similar to the ATC team or an MServ team or an MPS team. Okay, we're there to support the other teams within BBD. We're not a data science team on our own. We're the only ones that do the projects. You may not touch us type of thing. Definitely not. We're there to be the one that actually helps and guides, bring in skill, help you with your approaches. So see us more as a supporting team. And as such, when you see opportunities on the ground where you may need some sort of data science activities, then it would be to approach us and see how we can assist you, either with our resourcing or skill or just guidance from that perspective.
Where you can use TNA and Rob's PDF segmentation tools. It's always useful. So now from a cloud perspective, we obviously need to utilize a lot of cloud resources when talking about data science or when implementing anything under this data science umbrella. As BBD, we are quite biased towards AWS, or people tend to think that. Is that something that we are only focused on? Are we only focused on AWS, or where are our expertise?
So I've built on all 3 of the major clouds, but at the same time, I've used AWS the most. It's just the way life works.
Well, you're the one with certs for Azure and AWS, so we have competency, guys, for both. Yeah, so we are cloud agnostic, but for example, some workloads we have Terraform for it to get started on AWS very quickly, but because we've never actually had an opportunity to run it on Azure, we just don't have that set up yet until someone goes, hey, can you do it? Then we'll do it. But the actual models themselves, the tools themselves can run anywhere.
And that's the idea. Want to be as flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to limit ourselves to one provider is shooting ourselves in the foot. I think it's more around understanding how to build your actual data pipelines, your models, etc. And then being aware of what the cloud providers actually offer. So it's more around understanding how to use SageMaker or how to use the Azure equivalent or Google Cloud equivalent. And I think that's where we'll do from an implementation perspective. But generally, the models that we are writing are in Python, TensorFlow, all of that, which can be ported across any platform. So, yeah.
I think something else to just acknowledge really quickly is that model building is a time consuming, and let's be honest, we're not likely to improve. What exists out there in the world has had a lot of time and money spent on it. And so if you can hook into a cloud and use a provided service, you're going to get a much better return on investment, particularly for your time.
And I think in some of the discussions we've had with clients around how to get started, you know, sometimes it is just easy. Okay, well, have a look at the services that each cloud provider is offering. Try that out, play with that. And if that starts getting to a point where it's not achieving your ultimate objective, then you start looking at the more customized and, you know, and specific models and approaches that you want to follow. So it can help from a sales perspective, can help from people getting up to speed and understanding AI from that perspective. But ultimately, once you start understanding that environment and you want something more bespoke, you know, then you start building actual models that are more deployable across any platform at the end of the day.
So a bit more on how challenging it is to do data science in general, like working with all these big models and trying to develop models is something that's a bit out of scope. But what are the other challenges of working in data science, but specifically ML in South Africa or from an African context? Maybe Rob, it's a good thing for you to answer because you have that
I have the mic.
Experience.
I think the challenge is consistent no matter where you are. It's access to good, clean, quality data, because the AI workflow is data to answer, and you're trying to create a function approximation between those two things. And if you don't have a good data set, then your approximation is going to be abysmal. And getting hold of good data is really difficult thing. English, French, German, Dutch, those all exist. But for our 11 official languages, a good text corpus just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, if you know, we touched on the cloud offerings and their sort of AI services that they do. I think it's very important to understand what they've used to train their particular models. Generally, very Americanized, for want of a better term. So they're not always suited to our landscape. So just because it looks like a good model doesn't mean it's going to work here. I tried to show someone an example of a model that could identify addresses in documents. I used AWS's equivalent to do that, and it didn't pick up South African addresses. We have postal codes, you know, they have other things, and yeah. So essentially, the formats and stuff are different. So just be aware when you are doing it, using existing models, what it has been trained on, the bias that is sort of built into it, and then obviously what you then need to address, you know, based on the context that you're working in.
Cool. So before we wrap up our discussion with the final question, just want to knock a little eye roll out of Rob and ask your opinion on ChatGPT. With the most recent release of GPT-4 on Wednesday, there couldn't be a better time for you to give your 2 cents on the matter. And TNA too, you guys, we all know you guys are vocal.
So it does unlock a sector that has just not been available. Like processing and understanding text is a hard problem. And the truth is, if we were to try to do it from scratch ourselves, we'd probably bankrupt BBD. GPT-4, which is just released, they managed to release a paper on the release and say nothing in like 12 pages. But we know that equivalent size models are trained on around 2048 A100 GPUs for 30 days. The amount of compute behind it is just gargantuan. And then you go and you do reinforcement learning on top of that to fine tune it to a behavior that you want for a specific user group, and the amount of compute is just colossal. I think to touch on what it is at its core is it's a probabilistic model. So you give it text, it looks at that text and says, what is the most likely next word given the current text? That's all that it is. That's the way it was trained. The reason that they're so secretive at the moment is because they haven't actually done anything unique since the paper written in 2017 by Google. They literally looked at the paper and went, cool, let's go from 150 million parameters to a couple billion. That's a good idea. And it has been a good idea. It's unlocked a lot of potential for a lot of different use cases. I don't know what else people want to know.
Who are you asking?
You can ask when there's questions. Like,
I think if I can add anything, I think obviously that's the biggest hype at the moment is ChatGPT or GPT-3 in general, and every other organization is trying to compete with it. So that's what's in the market at the moment. I think from a BBD perspective, a lot of clients are wanting to jump on that hype cycle at the moment. And so whether it's that specific model or something that's just in the natural language space, I think that gives us opportunity. Okay, people currently believe that GPT-3 will solve everyone's problems. We know it won't, but there are other problems that can be solved because they think now, they can use GPT-3 for it. So for us that are working, with our clients and are starting to see people trying to, okay, well, this thing is out there, I must use it, or I'm going to fall behind the curve. Those are opportunities to speak up, speak to us and see how we can solve the actual problems, whether ultimately it does use GPT-3 or equivalent or some other thing. I think that's, you've got to actually tailor it to the specific use case. So I think all of us should see this as an opportunity from a business perspective, and sort of see where this hype takes us and who sort of wins at the end of the day.
yeah. So from my brief stint in the data science team and what I've also taken from this conversation and just being around you guys is that data science in general is a gargantuan field with gargantuan possibilities and, the need for petabytes of data and millions of cores to solve your problems. It's a really big problem to solve and not one that will be solved quickly in a space that is very much still growing in BBD. So what are we doing to increase competency or to work or build competency here at BBD?
I think this year I've sort of changed tact and sort of who and how we actually engage as an organization in the space. Previously, I ran a community for a year and a half, and it needed to be sort of by word of mouth, whether you knew about it, and then you can sort of join. It's not an exclusive club, so that's first of all. I think for us, we need everyone within BBD to be familiar with it. Anyone who's interested in it is welcome to join and share their insights. Anyone who wants to find out about it is just inquisitive, reach out and let's have some discussion. So from that perspective, the idea is to have more of these events where anyone can join us, have a couple of speakers to actually teach you something, as opposed to me trying to figure out a topic every week. And then as well, we actually want to do some practical things. So have a few sort of challenges where you all can get involved, play around with the AI and data science space, learn a bit more, and so build up your skills from that perspective. So based on that, I'll be spamming your email folders tomorrow. You can join the data science community in BBD via a couple of links, which I'll share. So there's an email address where you guys can spam us in return. And then there's also a Teams channel where anything that we find, we can post. If you have anything interesting to share, post on there, any questions on that. So that's sort of our open channel to the rest of the community within BBD. And please use it. We'll have a look at that. And if there's topics that you want to be discussed, if there's stuff that you want to present as well, please put up your hand. Happy to sort of arrange those sessions. And then the other thing is I'm actually constituting a BBD Data Science Challenge. So we're hosting a challenge on Kaggle. Anyone is open to actually participate. Sort of hopefully picked a relatively simplish challenge for everyone. So it's for anyone who's interested. You don't need to have years and years of experience in the space. So go and have some fun. I think that's the big thing about it. For those that have got quite a bit of experience and have done it a bit, there's always different ways to solve a problem. So try and experiment, see what we can do, and hopefully see who ends up at the top of the leaderboard. It's going to run till Easter pretty much. You can do it as an individual. You can pair up in teams. So I think I've allowed sort of 5 members in a team. So go and have some fun. We'll evaluate how things go. And then the idea is to have more of those challenges through the year, adding a bit more complexity and, sort of some nice prizes towards the end of the year for people that are, have written some good stuff. All right.
So all you grads who I know want to break into the AI space, we better see you sign up for that. So that's super exciting. Is there a prize for this one?
Not for this one, probably just bragging rights. So there is a leaderboard, so you'll be able to see where you come out. And if your buddy is a little bit higher than you, then you can obviously try and beat him. So I think I just wanted to see how people take it, have fun, and then, yeah, the idea is to grow it and then have some prizes throughout the year.
The prize is clout. Okay, so before we close off, does anybody have any questions? Lucky, what was your question? Oh, Mario has already answered it. What was the question?
Sorry, the question was for Rob in that he spoke about all of this compute power that is behind GPT-3 and 4. And I was wondering if we're considering leveraging on that hype and perhaps using it as a service to solve some of our clients' problems directly. But I think Marius then spoke to it at length.
Yeah, so we don't want to leverage off the hype. We don't want to compete and create GPT-5 or BBD GPT. I think, we don't quite have the power to do that at this point. But, obviously, with the stuff that we've done in Seeker, there's some overlap with that. But I think it's more around the hype that it's creating out there and people becoming aware of opportunities. People are going to think that they can solve it with GPT, but there'll probably be other ways and probably more simpler ways to solve it as well.
And also, you can't go out and create problems. Like people are going to go about like, oh, I really want to use it. For what? Like you need a problem to exist first. And that's pretty important.
You have a question from Katie?
I have two. The first is why data for each of you individually? Like what about data science fuels motivation for you? And the second is by challenge, do you mean game jam? And by game jam, do you mean that like anyone non-technical can join too?
Well, I'll go for the second one first. So anyone can try who's non-technical, and there is coding involved. Okay, so you are going to have to write at least a notebook in some sort of fashion, probably Python or so. Find a friend if you can't code. So yes, it is a bit technical.
There's brownie points for a video presentation for your results.
Yeah. and no stealing of answers. I think hopefully that gets picked up in the way we've set up the challenge. I think from a data perspective, why data? I think just over the last, 5-10 years, that's where the world is going to. Everything's been data driven. And so a lot of businesses and organizations are using that to make decisions. And that's where the opportunities lie. And I think that's where we need to be taking advantage of those.
Why data? There's a lot of it. Like a lot of it. That's actually really what got me started. I was thinking about, people know a hell of a lot about me and I don't know what they're doing with it. And that's kind of why I got into it. I wanted to know, what are we doing with all of this mass of data?
So I started playing with data science in 2013 before it was cool. And I came across it on Coursera and went, that looks interesting. There wasn't anything particular, and just came back to it, went full circle, left alone, wrote normal applications, got bored, went back.
I think to carry on Katie's question, not specifically around the game challenge or the data science challenge, but I think don't just see data science as a technical, only technical people can be involved, okay? There's a lot of business aspects to it. So people who are BAs, testers, UI, UX, you're all affected by data. And so having that understanding how that fits into your applications as well, means, it's good for you to have that grounding and that understanding. So it's not just for the people that want to write code, it actually covers everyone.
It's a channel for people to voice concerns about job security. Okay, any other questions?
So I was watching a video, I think a few days back, and on that video, they outlined that the issue that the developers that make these models, ChatGPT and other predictive models, is that they don't really have, not really a log, but they can't really see step by step how the model gets to the answer. So my question is that really an issue? And if so, how much of an impact does it have on improving the model and also understanding it?
In your application, do you have an audit log? How important is that audit log? How regularly does that audit log get checked? The answer is it is important, because just now your AI model makes a decision that blocks someone from getting access to certain banking products. That has a tangible impact on that person's life. They're well within their right to say, why did you deny me? And so there's a whole developing field around responsible AI, which is including, are you evaluating how biased your model is? Can you explain why your model does something? Can you come back when someone raises a question on a legal ground and say, this is why? And I think that is why people are still scared of AI, particularly large language models, is they're just really difficult to explain.
I think from a coding perspective, when you start using neural networks and that go to N levels, it becomes difficult to trace it. So trying to be able to understand what it produced, why it's been produced as part of the way you build the model and actually track it through its life cycle, that's what you need to be doing. So I think that's probably where that sort of comment in that video was referring to, is that the bigger your neural networks grow, the more difficult it is to actually follow it, debug it, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate here or something, but so I'm currently on a project at a large organization which has its own small data science team, and the purpose of that data science team is to really try and understand data in the business and see if they can create value from it. So my question would be, us as BBD coming as external people, could we provide value to that data science team? And especially, yeah, bearing in mind that a lot of it is actually, you know, understanding, having business insight to the data. Yeah.
The answer is definitely, and I think there's probably in a couple of spaces. So one is help them thinking through their use case. So if you think about a normal BA, what do they try and do? They're trying to elicit requirements, etc. So in the data science space, that's what you're trying to do as well. So what is the organization trying to achieve by this? What is the use case? What are they trying? What is their outcome? How do we actually achieve it? What data do we need? You know, so from that perspective, we can help guide and help them with their thinking in terms of how they produce it. As I mentioned before, that they generally try and keep the building of what they actually do in-house. But again, we can help them with that. And then finally, once they've got a series of models and actually want to now put it within the organization in production, actually running on a daily basis, you know, that's the other aspects where we can help them. But I think the upfront thinking is the important piece. So like Tiana said, you have to have a problem to solve. So we need to understand what is that they want to solve, and we can help them in that regard.
I would also say that if they've spent the time thinking through the problem and developing a model, that is a fair amount of work. And if they've taken that on and they're happy with the results of that, that's fine. But going from here is my demo model that I've presented to the board to, okay, let's hit this every day is a very different problem. And so supporting that process is probably where we're going to see most work.
No, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, different question, but also I think, yeah. So there are lots of cool features like, I think AI is actually getting slowly more integrated into our lives without us even noticing, like captions on YouTube. And like last week, like I wanted to get rid of people in a picture and I could just do that on my phone. But like with a lot of things, it's cool, but can you can you get money out of it? Is what I'm saying.
Get money out of it.
Yeah, like can you sell it? Like, and I think it's not really just a AI thing. There's a lot of software that people make, and it's all open source and free. But like, as a service, is there like a space for BBD to pay in? Yeah.
Yes, I do believe so. I mean, like I said, Kev hasn't given us the budget to challenge GPT. So we're not about to go and create a whole model or new set of models ourselves from the ground up. I think it's understanding how we can use them. And then the money is in how we add value to the customer. Okay. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean it improves their sales, but it can improve their efficiency. So there's a number of ways to actually apply AI and analytics that actually brings other value other than the pure monetary. You know, to some extent, everything ends up as money, but you know, it doesn't necessarily just mean sales and not. And there's a big push in the world for AI for good. So those are trying to be some initiatives where we can use AI, which actually aid and help humanity, and not necessarily making the big bucks at the end of the day. You know, so there's a lot of opportunity to actually use this and bring value to customers, whether it's money or value in other aspects.
Any final questions? I think, oh.
So Rob, you spoke briefly about that paper published in 2017, The Attention is All You Need, where they first proposed transformers. And obviously that's taken around 4 to 5 years to really materialize into something that we all know today. Do you think that there's been some sort of change in the technology now that we'll see in 4 to 5 years that will possibly be the next type?
I mean, if I had that crystal ball, then I wouldn't be sitting here. I would own several companies like BBD. It's a truthful answer. I do think that we're on the cusp of a revolution similar to that happened for handcraft, the first industrial revolution. I think the same thing's going to happen in the intellectual space. When? Everyone would like to know that. But I think things like ChatGPT and Copilot are demonstrating that the capabilities there, if nothing else, to act as a really good assistant.
And also don't neglect how much new, fresh data we're feeding it by using it. We're creating way better data than they had to start with.
And I think the big thing that's probably propped up is with the cloud providers, the compute power is now available to a lot more people. And I think where previously it was, okay, these mega rich companies or, educational institutions, now with Azure, AWS, Google, anyone can sort of, get involved and start using these things. So I think whether it changes the way certain AI algorithms and models are built, I guess yet to be seen, but I think it's opened up a space for a lot more use.
Any more questions? I think let's wrap up then. Thank you all for joining us.